Hi, Dub here, and today we have a new episode in the art review series, and today we'll be checking out the work of Xutunzi over here, a freelance artist. Now, I did find their work first via this specific piece actually on Pinterest. Now, they do have a lot more recent work, so we'll be going over that eventually, but right now I want to focus on this just because it's what got me interested in their work in the first place. Oh shit, let me just turn the shit off. Here, oh, there you go. So what got me was actually their line work. Now it's not typical line work where it's like black ink, thin lines, where it's super tight. There is some structure there. It's very presentable, which I do like. But at the same time, there's sort of a looseness to it because it's not like, if you look at the edges, it's not always meeting, right? And there's sort of a fade out effect to their lines. Like it depends a lot on the pen pressure, I would say. But when it comes to the thickness, it does vary here and there, but it's not like thin to thick. It's more like, I think they're using some kind of initial direction sort of feature when it comes to the brush settings. So it kind of goes along with the position of your pen. That's what it looks like anyway. So I do like that. So they pretty much have like a same sort of sized brush that they use for their, line work. It's kind of like line work, but not typical line work that you would see online. Yes. So let's focus on this one. So we're going to be focusing more on some of their drawings here, and then we'll go more into their more recent work. I just like it. It's a bit different from the typical line work I see on, say, ArtStation, Instagram, Twitter, because it's sort of a balancing thing where it's presentable, meaning people can understand what you're drawing. Because sometimes drawings can be so conceptual to the point where only you can understand, which is, I mean, it's great for you, but for everyone else, you're sort of, it doesn't make sense, right? You want it, if you're trying to present your work to someone else who's not you, obviously you want to make it somewhat presentable. So I think Xutunzi has a nice sort of presentation in terms of their drawings here, which is very interesting because, again, when we're gonna go to their more recent work, they don't really do line work. They do more shape heavy kind of stuff, and it was obviously more painted, more colored, more rendered. So this one is a chick. She's fixing up her leg a little bit, right? So it's a pretty cool sort of quick concept thing. There's a bit of narrative going on, right? Now, obviously, this is not like the first sort of sketch. I think more and more I've been getting more comfortable with the idea of not trying to get it right in the beginning, because you're not gonna get it right in the beginning. Like, you need to sort of build up to something like this. Like, do a rough sketch in the beginning and then do your line work. And your line work doesn't even have to be like so tight. It can be like the work of Xutunzi. Right? It looks so fluid, looks so natural. And it almost looks like it was done with some kind of pencil brush, because if you look at the actual brush, like one side of it has a bit of a fade or a gradient. So it's not a very completely solid line. So it has that sort of, how you sketch with a pencil sometimes, and you sort of use the side of it. So it has that sort of fade out effect in one side of the pencil stroke. It has that same vibe, or these drawings have that same vibe, right? I mean, look at parts like this. Like, you do see some openings here and there, so it's not like a finished, like, it's not the kind of line work where you can use the fill bucket tool to like color stuff quickly, because it's not always going to be closed. Like, the lines are not going to be always intersecting and connecting. So I think that also contributes to that more natural looking sort of effect, right? I think this one would have to be my favorite, because you know what? I think adding this sort of gray thing, that simple gray color. I mean, you'll see people do this when they like sketch traditionally with their like a pen and with their Copic markers. Like, they'll just add a bit of like for color here, like a basic sort of value, usually gray, and it just helps to add a little more energy. I mean, obviously it's a design thing. You want to show which part is which. Maybe the pants here, the back part of the pants and the top of this chick and the gun are somewhat the same sort of value or material, right? And it helps sort of segment your drawing, because if it's all line work, it can look a bit too much, right? Compare that to this drawing over here. Sure, there is no gray value thing, but they did add like the hair and the black, or this thing for her arm, or the sleeves basically. So it helps her to break things up a little more, even though there's a lot going on here. Because of this black sort of thing, or this dark chunked up value, it just helps to segment things a little more, right? So it's not too intensive in terms of detail. Although between this one and this one, I do like this one way more, right? So let me go to their more recent work. Let me hit X. Okay, so based in Shanghai, China. There you go. So yeah, they have a lot more painted work. Let me bring out the app. Look at that. So this one is the Catwoman fan art, their own interpretation. As you can see, they're using the lasso fill, sort of. I'm not sure if it's a simple selection tool or a lasso fill tool in like Studio Paint, but the point, it doesn't matter because it's all based on the lasso sort of tool thing. It's basically a selection tool, right? And for Photoshop, I think you have to paint it in. I mean, there are plugins where it automatically fills the selection. But in Clip Studio Paint, you have a separate tool. You have the lasso tool, and then you have the lasso fill tool, where in the latter, it just automatically fills up whatever you're selecting. You're not even selecting, you're just filling the thing automatically, right? So it saves you time. It reminds me a little bit of the work of Seven. I forgot their actual name, but it's Seven something. And they do have a lot of work where they do make these sorts of paintings where the edges are super tight, because they do use that lasso sort of thing to cut the edges to fill the main shapes, right? So the lasso tool / lasso fill tool is a big part of this sort of technique. I also know a lot of environment artists who kind of do this, or are they environment artists or maybe visual development people? They do these kinds of illustrations where very sharp, the shapes are very evident, and you can tell they're using the lasso selection or lasso fill tool. You'll see this too a lot in like editorial types of illustrations in VizDev. I will link some artists who are. There's another artist called Mikhail something, Sawtryak something, and I like his work. It looks a lot like this, where it's heavy on the shapes, right? This one's a study, I believe. So you can check their art stage. I will link, by the way, the links in the description below. But I do like this one, even though it's a study. It looks so freaking cool, right? And if you look at the actual plane, right, there are like blue lines on the edges. I think they were added like later. They're not really part of the original sort of line sketch, I would think, or I believe. That's my guess. But it just adds a bit of something. You know, it's sort of it's a style thing. You don't have to put it in, but it just adds a little bit of punch. You know, Evan Lee likes to do the same thing. Once he's done with his painting, he'll add like black lines. It looks like that's the initial sketch, but it's not. He just adds that to add a bit of like natural sort of sketchy vibes to his work. I do like it. Maybe for his more recent pieces, it's still pretty much the same thing. Lots of lasso, oh shit, right? Like the edges are a bit more clear cut, so they're definitely using some layers here. They have some kind of layer management going on. It just helps break up a lot of these sort of more complex shapes, especially when you have one shape over another shape and you have lots of that. Layers matter. So here we have the Joker fan art. Oh yeah. Oh, it reminds me a little bit of Hue. HEUU underscore something. So they do have a lot of texture as well, but it's not like from the brush. I think they add that later on as sort of a filter thing, right? But most of their color or their color fill-ins, it's really just one sort of thing. And that itself does not have texture. I'm guessing they do the whole texture thing after. Just my guess. Even the title of this thing, Joker, it's done with the lasso tool. Well, again, if you look at the teeth, right, of this Joker guy, look at how he or she or they added the black lines, right, to sort of signify the edge, or to add or to emphasize the edge a little bit in the teeth. They did the same thing with the plane. Let me show you. Do you see the plane? They added the blue lines, right? They did the same thing with this Joker guy. So it just adds a bit of, you don't have to do it, but it can add a bit of like extra punch, right? It's not really you're kind of breaking rules here. Like it doesn't always make sense, but it, you know, if you put it where it's supposed to be, it just adds a little bit of something else. You'll see that a lot in like editorial illustrations. They're very experimental with these kinds of techniques, right? Or graphic designers, poster illustrators, they're more playful with their painting techniques. Look at this. So a lot of the effects I would assume done after the gradients. It looks like they're using gradient maps after their illustration process. But you can tell by the way this thing was illustrated, they're using the lasso heavily. And again, with the text, they're just writing it in with the lasso tool. So here we have a bunch of daily paintings. Now this one, they're just painting it raw. It looks more like a gouache painting or quick step. Let me just focus in. Well, let me just see this first. So they do have a bunch of daily paintings where it's more typical, right? I think gouache paintings or oil paintings. But I think this one looks more gouache because it's there's less mixing happening, and you do see a lot of more opaque sort of like it looks more opaque, you know, like you don't build up the paint via opacity. Let me just zoom in here and see more of this guy. Let me just turn this off. Jeez. Oh, look at this. Just a quick rundown. So this artist has quite a few different like approaches or styles. So this one's more gouache, right? You see a lot of like traditional artists do this, like plein air style, where they just paint environments, landscapes, urbanscapes, cityscapes. And with these kind of illustrations, I've noticed a lot of people, they skew the perspective a lot, the proportions. It does make your illustrations way more playful. You'll see this a lot in like viz dev, visual development artists or storyboard artists. They like to just push things a little more, right? Their illustrations don't always have to be like accurate. It's more about like the mood, the vibe. So I recommend sort of diving in on people who do a lot of like viz dev, visual development artwork. I mean, look at the colors here. Ooh. They do add a bit of noise in the end, and maybe I think that's where most of the texture comes from. I'm not sure if the actual brush has. Oh, it has a little bit of texture. Let me just zoom in here. Oh shit, it's a big painting. High resolution. Oh yeah, there is some texture, right? You'll see it a lot in the edges. Most of the center of the brush is very opaque. Like you don't get to see a lot through, but as you lessen the pen pressure hold, the more texture you see, and in the actual edges, in the outsides of the brush, you will see that sort of jitter thing happening. So it adds that natural feel again. And then on top of that, they do add some. I do think they sharpen their work. It looks like they do sharpen their work, and then from there they add the noise sort of filter. Look at how playful these strokes are, right? So I recommend too checking out gouache artists who do a lot of like plein air paintings. They're very into like big shapes, saving time, and they're very opaque painters. Obviously, they use gouache, but they just know how to layer their paints in this kind of way. And yeah, so I do recommend them as well, or those kinds of people. Let me check something out. I do like. Oh, this one's kind of cool. Right? Let me just zoom in. Oh, look at that. Oh, right? And it looks like they're just using one brush. And that one brush can be used for like details, smaller strokes, and for maybe even bigger strokes. So it also helps to just limit your tools when you're doing these sort of studies, because brush variety, as much as I love variety in terms of brushwork and stuff like that, it's not necessary all the time, especially if you're just trying to study, right? So I do recommend you check out the work of Xutunzi, because they do have a lot of work, different styles, different approaches. I do like the Linework stuff. Granted, it's fairly old, but I think it still stands the test of time. Ooh, wow. This one's my favorite, right? Oh, there you go. Right. Especially this chick. Right? The back shot is pretty freaking nice. Oh, she's kawaii. Let me check this chick out. Oh, kawaii. Look at that. Oh, this one's more painted, more typical like oil painting sort of look. Oh, wow. Those colors are amazing. Oh, I do see a little bit of a... Let me just zoom in here. Color dynamics, right? And they have good sort of shape design, I would say. Look at the face, so rendered. It really captures like the subtle sort of shifts in value and hues, right? But as you go further down, it does get less blended. It gets more obviously simplified, but with the face, you see that sort of very subtle, delicate blending. Even the eyes look amazing as fuck. Oh, sorry, as hell. I'm trying not to curse in my videos. But yeah. So check out Xutunzi. I do recommend their work, and you will see a lot of different styles or different approaches, but they all have certain things in common. For example, their shapy sort of vibe or design, and they're very experimental too. They use a lot of different sort of tools here and there, and yeah. So that's it for this review, this art review of Xutunzi. hopefully you enjoy their work, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.